I make that 7 o'clock. And given that it's Friday night, I think we want a prompt start. And I know that George, our speaker, and I share a plan not to overrun. It's Friday night at the end of a busy week, and I know you've all got plans. Thank you for joining us on Friday night. I am going to blame George for the timing, because when we first started discussing plans for this transition toolkit training, I realized just how busy George and his organization is training. I spoke to him in the Middle East when he was training with schools over there, and he's got to do this on a Friday because he's off to South America imminently, doing similar training with schools and other providers. So I do hope, and I know from experience in Great School with sixth form today, we've got a really, really experienced speaker for you tonight. Very, very brief introductions from me. Bit of housekeeping first, if I may. We know that these Google Meets work best when mics are muted, please. Videos, cameras, as you wish. We're very happy to see studies, kitchens, lounges behind you. It's even quite interesting. Questions at the end. I know George will probably speak for about half an hour, and then 15 minutes or as long as you need on reflections on your own experiences or questions. And I'll make a note of questions that you type into the chat bar, and then I'll compare a Q&A at the end, probably about 7:30. So what are we here to do? You might reflect on your own young experiences of going to university, if that was your pathway, and parents, teachers, tutors saying to you, it's amazing, you'll love it, you must go, best years of your life. And that might have been true, and it might have been true for me with the rose-tinted glasses of hindsight. But I'll just share with you a memory of mine. This day that you can see on the screen there is etched in my memory. And I showed this to the students in Great School earlier, to some amusement, largely to do with the hair. This was a day in late September 1997, and that's me and my dad. Unusually, my mum is behind the camera taking the picture. I will never forget that day for a whole range of emotional reasons. Yes, excitement might have been one of them, but I think more relevant words to describe how I was feeling might have been frightened, alone, scared, isolated. Fairly soon after that rover left to go back down to Derby, I probably felt very, very homesick within minutes. And I remember sitting on my bed in my room in, what was it, flat 2, College Wynd on Cowgate, ground floor between the Royal Mile and Holyrood. Very lively, brilliant. But we want to do this training, and we did it with the students today, because I think it's time for a more balanced preparation for their post-18 life, where there will be exciting moments, there will be brilliant moments, there will be amazing friendships, but there will also be homesickness, isolation, loneliness, fear. And they are emotions that they will feel in an environment where they don't have the structures that they have now, either of home or of school. Mum, dad, siblings, grandparents, tutor, head of house, head of sixth form, matron, Miss Woodmansey. They don't know just how many people are so closely involved in their care up to the age of 18. And then all of a sudden, a very, very different environment. So we've got George from Mind Your Health tonight. He spoke to the students about exactly these moments today with great power. And I should say that your sons and daughters were brilliant, nearly 300 of them in Great School on a Friday, Chip Friday. They were hungry, but they were fantastic, listening to some really strong words. And yes, suicide and suicide safety, suicide awareness was one of the words mentioned the most. So that's where we are. I'm going to let George introduce himself, his organisation, his experiences, and take you through the next half hour, and then I'll come back in at the end to take your questions. So George, if you are there, fingers crossed, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cliff. Yes, hi everyone. It's good to see you all in some shape or form. You might be thinking, oh, that's quite a lovely background. I'm currently in a hotel in Woodbridge. Hopefully we can see the slides. and if not, I'm sure Mr. Cliff will tell me. My name's George. Thank you for the kind words, Mr. Cliff. I just want to actually back what has just been said. 280, just under 300 young men and women today. I just want to say, for those who are here, and if your kids were there today, they were incredibly gracious, incredibly kind and patient. And you know what? It was very nice for them to look me in the eye and say thank you very much at the end. You know, we don't do it for the thanks or the well dones, but it's nice when young people do that. And I you know, comparing myself to them when I was their age, goodness me, I would not have accepted the training as willingly as they did. In terms of my background, I was a teacher for many years, and I retrained as a therapist. I work primarily with children aged 6 all the way up. I'm a couples therapist, which is always interesting as well in some aspects, but I have a particular focus around 2 things in my therapeutic work. One is eating disorders, and one is suicidal ideation, suicidal thoughts, behaviors, and actions. I didn't make a plan of it. It was just such a large crossover with the demographics I work with. As we go through these things tonight, I just want that big one about health and safety. We're going to be talking about subject matter which we've all got lived experience in. And I don't mean that in an antagonistic way. What I mean is that topic of suicide is something we are all aware of. We all grew up with the topic. I think for the most part, all of us are of the same generation and the generation before, where suicide has a lot of stigma around it. As Mr. Cliff said, the word suicide was mentioned a lot today, not for shock or awe, but because it's not a dirty word. It's far from it. It's a factual word. I quickly dug into this with the kids today, and I want to highly recommend a video for all of you. It's all about brain development in adolescence. He is the leading expert in this in the world. I promise you, I might recommend people tonight, and I promise you, I don't get any money for it. I'm a big believer in sharing good practice and sharing guidance. His name is Andrew Curran, Curran, and he talks about brain development in adolescence. And there seems to be this big misconception of children and young people, they're dying left, right, and centre from suicide. Oh, there's the cases of children having thoughts of suicide has just skyrocketed over the years. That's not necessarily the case. Much like with eating disorders, the statistics there, we can question these statistics. Are they increasing each year because of the risk factors, or are they increasing because we're reducing stigma and we're talking about these things? People are coming forward more and more. I do think it's more balanced. I do think the risk factors are there that we never had growing up, but I don't think that is what's caused these numbers to rise. I think it's because we're more willing to talk about this. But Andrew Curran talks about brain development, and I jokingly said to the kids today that we always have this expression that boys don't grow up, or it takes them a lot longer. But biologically, young people do take a while to grow up, and we don't mean physically. We mean neurologically. We mean by the brain. The 2 big things we always need to be mindful of about brains is the prefrontal cortex, which is all about planning and reasoning. It doesn't grow until 25 years. They say most men don't fully develop brain-wise till 25, 26. What does this mean for us? It means that young people become more impetuous and they're prone to high-risk behavior. Added to this, what young people don't realize, and I think all of us on this call agree, and let's not nod too hard, they also don't think of permanency. They don't think about the results of their actions. And we often say to our kids, what were you thinking? What were you thinking? As is our right as a parent or guardian, by the way. But a lot of the time they're not thinking. And it's not because they don't have a brain. It's because their brain is developing still. They get that red mist and they do something, they see the result, and then it comes over them and they realize, gosh, what was I doing? And then obviously the amygdala, this is emotional core for passion, aggression. It's that cave person part of our brain.
George, sorry, would it help to go to present on your PowerPoint so we can see the amygdala and the other brain?
It says I'm sharing.
Sharing, are you presenting from PowerPoint? Go to present.
Yes, I'm doing that. Let me
because we're seeing the small tiles but
Oh, I
not the
right.
present. So you're sharing, absolutely right. And then within your PowerPoint file, if you go to present slides, then we'll be able to see that brain diagram that was so good earlier.
I've pressed the button. Can you see it, Mr. Cliff?
If you go back to, so you've gone to stop present now. If you go back to share slides again, present now.
Sorry, everyone. Can you see it?
Yeah, it's coming back on now. And then in your PowerPoint file, if you go to slideshow, and then we'll be able to see the larger version.
All good?
We can see it, but we've got your smaller tiles to the left there.
It's all big for me. Mr. Cliff, should we do it the other way, where you host it and I ask you for next slide then?
Do you want to do that?
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Sorry, everyone. It usually I usually press the big button and it shows it all.
Well, it might do the same for me, and in which case I'll be the first to apologise.
Yeah.
Let's try this. And then I'll go there and there. What have we got now?
Just your front title. Oh, keep going. There it is. Perfect. Thanks, Mr.
Better for everyone.
Apologies, everyone. My fault there. Technophobe.
Right. I will be your next slide, please, administrator, George.
Thanks, Mr. Cliff. Perfect. Well, so we're looking at those two parts, the prefrontal cortex and the amygdala. They're the front part of the brain, the red part. These are the things that we first have as young people, children and babies. It's all about impulsivity. It's that aggression. It's the cave person part of us. It's the learning curve. Andrew Curran says this: why do young people go through adolescence? Huge dopamine surges, low serotonin. They go through adolescence, guys, to learn and make mistakes. That is a key part of development for all of us. I balance this with the kids today, however. We don't want them to be making mistakes all the time without learning. We certainly don't want them to be making those big, major mistakes when we could easily prevent it. So if you don't mind going to the next slide, Mr. Cliff, that would be ideal. And click it again, please. So we've got everything. There it is. So I spoke about this with the young people today. We all know what suicide is. But the reason behind it, what's the big psychological reason? It's all to do with pain. When someone is in such emotional and perhaps even physical pain, they just wish that pain to end. And in our desperation, our front part of our brain takes hold and thinks, the pain would end if I only do this. I didn't share this with the young people today, but we have those impetuous thoughts when we're on the side of a building, when we're on the edge. When we're in such physical pain with a limb, we sometimes think, oh, just get rid of the limb, just to get rid of this pain for just one moment. We start to become desperate. And I say this with no judgment. I work therapeutically with people all the time going through this. Suicide has the highest recovery rate for a reason, because we know how to handle pain. We know how to handle emotional pain. It's partly prevention and intervention. The big warning signs for us lot, though, are what we see here. Please don't start ticking these off, guys. If these signs and symptoms do resonate with you, I think it's a really healthy thing to then perhaps contact Mr. Cliff in the school, contact a friend, a colleague, whoever it is. We have this big misconception that if someone's talking about wanting to die, that they're not serious. That was my generation. We were told you've got to be mindful of the quiet ones. Well, yes, we have to be mindful of the quiet ones if they're usually very active and loud. But we need to be mindful if they're talking about it, there's a reason for it. We're creating a generation where we want them to talk about their feelings. The big one for me, however, guys, is that bottom left one. Sudden trauma or life crisis, such as the death of a loved one. We would even go so far to say as well, relationship breakdowns. Some of them giggled at this, and I can understand why. We often think suicide is a male pandemic. 75% of all deaths by suicide are by men, and that's not because they don't talk about their feelings. That's a reason, it's not the reason. There's two other big factors. One is that men are more aggressive with their methods, so they have a less chance of survival. The last one, which caused all of them to giggle or be a bit self-conscious, is that psychologically we now know that men are more emotionally impacted by a breakup. It's been proven now that on average, men are more impacted by an emotional breakup. But I link that to the whole idea of because they don't talk about their feelings, but also they feel that they can't talk to anyone about it socially. What do men get when they say, "Oh, Mrs. and I have broken up"? What do most men say to him? Chin up. Let's go get a drink. You know, there's not a healthy emotional balance there. So, Mr. Cliff, could you go to the next slide, please? And you might just have to click all through these till we get the big ones. There's lots of potential risk factors for our young people. Oh yeah, just quick. Thanks, Mr. Cliff. Lots of them. But we know statistically for our young people, and I work with lots of university students, those ones on the right, from social media all the way down to isolation, they are the biggest risk factors. Please don't get me wrong. Of course, substance abuse will be on there, alcohol and drug use. But in terms of lots of people don't drink alcohol and take drugs in today's society because of different cultures. There's lots of international students where it's not something for them. But those eight, beg your pardon, on the right are the biggest risk factors. When I work with young people who have got suicide ideation, self-harming thoughts and behaviors, it's a huge correlation here. I spoke to the young people today about balance. Social media, I'm a big believer that young people should have phones and social media, but I'm also a big believer that they should have it in moderation, just like with everything else. For example, I'll say this at the dinner table or when they have food. Don't be looking at your phone. Eat together. Be mindful of what you're doing. Stress. One of the young men said today, stress is a big risk factor. And I said, yes, in balance. It's good to have a bit of stress in life. It causes us to perform. Nutrition, of course, I would say that with an eating disorder hat on, nutrition is a big impact. When they go to university, and some of them did laugh about this, they seem to think money does grow on trees. So they spend all their money on takeaways and Domino's, all this stuff. They have a nutritional imbalance, but then they also have financial issues. The biggest issue, however, is sleep deprivation. It's the biggest factor. Sleep deprivation, all of us here as adults who have had children know this. Sleep deprivation is the first form of torture. To not get enough sleep, it breaks you. It's a huge factor. Now, it's not our mindset here, guys, where get a good night's sleep and you'll be right as rain tomorrow. We know this. If you get some sleep, it's great, but it's getting the sleep. It's getting that quality of sleep. The kids didn't roll their eyes at this today, by the way. Well done them when I said stop looking at your screen before bed. But I balanced it with stop looking at your screen when you wake up. And that's not just a message for these young people, guys. It's a message for all of us here. It's Friday evening. I'm really grateful you've given up your time for this evening. But, let's practice what we preach in all of this as well. What do most of us do when we wake up? Look at our phones straight away. What might we look at on our phone? Maybe not always the most positive things. We need to look not just how we go to sleep, but how we wake up from sleep as well. Poor physical health. I did say to the kids, that's probably a rite of passage at uni. Your health certainly takes a bit of a hit. A big issue for me I'm seeing, guys, are those last three. Self-esteem and resilience. I could rant all night about how social media impacts self-esteem. Boundaries. We ended today's session with the young people about boundaries. I don't drink. I'm teetotal. Never touched the stuff. I grew up with it. Doesn't interest me. And I remember at university during the initiations in Freshers Week where people made the big deal about you not drinking. I was very boundaried and I said, no, I don't want to drink. And when people asked me why, I said, because I don't want to drink. Have those boundaries and be firm with them. If you've got good self-esteem and good resilience, your boundaries are really strong because you don't need to explain yourself to anyone. That is something young people learn, however. I don't know about you lot. I look back at my 20s and think, my God, what was I thinking? What was I doing? And then the adult in me comes up and says, I was a young person. I was learning. I look back on these things and be a bit embarrassed or be a bit ashamed. And then I'm very kind to myself about it. And then lastly, isolation. I think I said this 3 times to the kids today. It is not cool to pretend that you don't miss home. It is not cool to pretend that you don't miss your mum or your dad or your guardians. I didn't say to them all, go call up your mum and give her a big hug tonight. Go tell your dad that you love him. Me and my mates in my 30s, we do that often. Why? Because we learn. But isolation is not healthy for anyone. I noticed Mr. Cliff mentioned on his first slide about a healthy toolkit. We are pack animals for a reason. Our kids should have alone time at university. Why? Because they've got to learn to be comfortable being alone. They're learning, continuing to learn all their lives, much like we are as adults. But isolation is different from having that alone time. And I'm going to gently say this, and I hope this isn't insulting, patronizing, or condescending. Most of my adult clients, they come with a unifying thing. It's empty nest syndrome. They are not used to the idea of not having children in their home. And now they've got the next 20, 30, 40 years of life to work through this. So isolation is not healthy for both our young people, our children, and it's not healthy for us. I'm not saying that we should be calling up our children every day, but a message now and then never goes remiss. And some of you might be thinking, that's what I was going to do anyway, George. Great, good. It's nice for our young people to know that we're thinking about them, even though we think we're too cool for it. It's nice to have that little check-in message, that parachute for our young people. For me, I don't know about you lot, and I don't know about Mr. Cliff. I was dropped off at uni, and my old man said to me, right, son, see you at Christmas. It was that sort of mentality. Love him dearly. It was a lie, guys. Can I just say, we used to go and watch football. I was at Reading Uni. We used to go watch Reading Football Club play every weekend because we wanted that time together. But, you know, that mindset now of parenting styles and attachment styles, it's changed generation by generation. So I've waffled there. Apologies. Mr. Cliff, could you go to the next slide? Let's keep going, I think, Mr. Cliff. Yeah, I talked about sleep with them. Let's keep going, Mr. Cliff. I wanted to go to maybe the myth parts. Thank you. Yeah, myths around suicide. Do you mind just showing all 4 myths, please, Mr. Cliff? I grew up with a huge myths about suicide. First off, I thought that if we talked about suicide as a subject, it makes things worse. It's the complete opposite. When we mention the word suicide, it can cause anxiety. For me, it's a dirty word for me growing up. Really dirty word. It's not anymore. Because we know factually, we know therapeutically and psychologically that mentioning the word suicide, it reduces stigma. And when we talk about suicide with someone who is struggling around suicidal thoughts, we are basically giving them permission to have the conversation with us. We are showing that we are comfortable. As a therapist, there are a few subject matters which clients always want to talk about, but they feel they can't talk about because of society. And so what do they need from me? They basically need me to say the words, say the naughty words, say the adult themes, because it shows that we're comfortable. The other one for me was that if a person is serious about suicide, they cannot be helped. We know this statistically, this isn't correct. They can be helped. It's got the highest recovery rate for a reason. If someone is talking about it, they won't act on them. As I said earlier, the quiet ones are the ones we need to be mindful of. No, we are trying to encourage this younger generation to be emotionally intelligent. If I can say this, be more emotionally intelligent than we ever were. You know, I spoke about this with the kids today. We didn't have a single minute of mental health talks at my school 20 years ago when I was at school. Just was not something on offer. So if they're talking about it, good. If they're talking about anything to do with their emotions, good. If we feel we're not equipped to do that and support them that way, let's find others who can. And lastly, you need to have a mental illness to have thoughts. 5% of society at any given time will have thoughts of suicide. Does that mean 5% of society at any time are having plans and going to take their life? No. But it's quite a natural thing for us in our most painful situations to be thinking, I just want this pain to end. It's a desperation. Mr. Clifford, we go to the next slide, please. I've got 5 minutes or so. Yeah, let's show all of this slide, I think, because I show this to the kids, and this is really important for us. How do we actually check if someone's at risk of suicide? The kid said to me straight away, gave me the answer straight away. Let's just ask. If I ask, would I put the idea in their head? No. We can't make things worse, guys. If they're having thoughts of suicide and by asking, can't make it worse. They're already thinking about it. If they're not thinking about suicide, but they're just going through a bit of pain and they're going through sadness or anger. By the way, guys, anger is a very healthy emotion. It's a big thing up with young people. I am going to generalize here, particularly young men. They've got 20 years of anger boiled up in them, and they come for therapy and it becomes depression. It's a high correlation there. So this whole idea of asking the question is really healthy. One of the young people said today, George, I'm worried about asking because I wouldn't know where to go with this. I said the usual things. At school, we have the safeguarding team. At university, they have a safeguarding team, but it's not part of university life. So I gave them all some tips. One was obviously Samaritans. Another is that this is an emergency response. Let's contact a trusted person, or we contact ambulance or police. The last one, and guys, if this is the one thing you leave with tonight, please be it this. It's a website called Hub of Hope. Hub of Hope. Please go on it and type in your postcode, or type in the postcode of the university your kids are going to go to. Brilliant. Thanks, Mr. Cliff. If you go on that website and put in your postcode, it will show you all the local agencies and charities around the area. Because when I retrained as a counsellor, you have to volunteer hours. I volunteered at two places, 2 agencies, 2 charities to get my hours. We have to do it for free. I'm not moaning about it. I think it's a good thing because we're not fully qualified yet. There are so many local charities and agencies that have counsellors who are there, who are willing to give support. If we go through the NHS, if we go through CAMS, which is the Child Adolescent Mental Health Services, there's a waiting list. There's 18-month waiting list where I'm usually based. It's not acceptable. So going through things like the Hub of Hope, where you can either get free counselling or, shall I at least say, heavily subsidised. I think at my first charity, they literally paid whatever they could, and it was like £5 for some, £1 for others. It wasn't about earning money. It's a charity for a reason. It's really something to consider, everyone. Mr. Cliff, could you go to the next slide, please? Let's keep going. Let's keep going, Mr. Cliff. I mentioned professional support to them. Yeah, let's show all of this, Mr. Cliff, all these bullet points. I gave these young people, there it is. Thanks, Mr. Cliff. I really put an onus on these young people about proactiveness rather than reactiveness. I apologize if I insulted them. I said, whilst you are legally adults and we do expect independence, you'd be a fool to not still be coming to family, coming to loved ones, having that friendship connection group. I think we all agree on this, that even though our kids might be taller than us and have a deeper voice and just have a bit more bounce back ability, those lucky so-and-sos where they can get hurt and be fine the next day physically, they're still children. They're still young people. Look at their brains. They're still developing, but we still want that proactiveness. I would, however, encourage this. We want them to be looking at resources, Hub of Hope, this, that, and the other. But I would encourage us all here as a couples therapist, I work with family dynamics, do it with them. Do it with them, guys, okay? Because you know what they're going to be thinking in their head. I'm so glad mum's helping me with this. I'm so glad dad's doing this. We still help them with all of this. I know some of you might be thinking, I was going to do that anyway, George. Beautiful. Our kids don't want us to be left at uni and then we say, right, see you at Christmas. I'm going to enjoy that empty house now. No, we work with them together on this, okay? But we looked at scenarios, Freshers Week, spent most of your money, hungover, exhausted, isolated, feeling lost in this new environment. And us as parents feel lost in this new environment. George, do I call them up every day? My gentle advice is probably not. But there's nothing wrong with sending a message now and then. Missing home. The big one is breakups, relationships, the workload. They are adult learners now. I do my counselling skills training for parents and teachers and whatnot, and they're a bit taken aback when they ask me a question, and my answer is, "You're an adult learner, deal with it." And it takes them aback a bit, but they need that more independence. But I always believe for this, when it comes to these young people at university and learning and getting these mistakes, I want it to be not two steps forward, one step back. I want it to be a step and a bit forward and a step back. I want them to learn gradually, because that's what university is about. It's not just about learning their subject, it's about learning life lessons. And the key thing they must have is a parachute, a safety net, and we must continue to be that for them. And if we go to the last slide, Mr. Cliff, very last slide, because I think this is important for all of us here as well. We need to find this balance in our support. Our children and young people are still children and young people, even if they turn 18. I know legally they're adults, but I don't believe in this stuff anymore. Boundaries was really important. I spoke about this with them today. Boundaries and consent are massive things in society. I know Ipswich do fantastic talks about consent, fantastic. But boundaries, that whole idea of no is enough. I don't wish to drink. I don't wish to do this. I don't wish to do that. This is how far I'll go with things. And we also must have boundaries ourselves as parents, which is so difficult. We want to rescue our children and we want to fix them all the time. It's our right as a parent. It's a beautiful reaction to have. But we must also reflect on our own boundaries in all of this. Reflect on, when is the right time for me to step in and help them? And when is the right time for me to step back and give my young people the opportunity to learn from a mistake? Because remember, we don't want our children to be living through our needs, our requirements. We want our children to eventually be young men and women who live their own lives according to their own needs and boundaries. And then we have more of a kind of side-by-side relationship with them than that hierarchical one. I just want to end with this. I'm mindful of time. Lots of people sometimes think with these talks, what does all of this have to do with suicide? Well, we've mentioned it briefly. But when we work therapeutically, anyone who works therapeutically with people who are having thoughts of suicide and those dangers of self-harm and whatnot, we do talk about it in therapy, but we don't talk about it for the whole 50 minutes. What do we focus on with these young people? We focus on the behaviours that have been going on, the risk factors, because if we focus on those things, suicide never even becomes a thought. So that's the whole point about these talks, about self-harm, about eating disorder awareness, all these sorts of things. We mention it in passing, but we focus on the preventative measures. And all of these things like isolation, homesickness, nutrition, and I've seen someone wants the slides. By all means, absolutely have them, because there's some great stuff there about nutrition. Sleep is another thing. Boundaries, all of these come into play. I work therapeutically with young people at university, and it's unanimous across the board. The things that are going on for them that might be causing them to have thoughts of suicide or harmful behaviours, it correlates to those risk factors on slide 4 or 5. Anyway, I'll let a breath out because I think I've held my breath for the whole 30 minutes there. Thank you for giving up your time, giving up your Friday evening. I hope you've got something from it. I hope you have. Mr. Cliff, as you said, there's a Q&A now. There's always that awkwardness whether we might have questions or not. I never take that personally if there isn't. But
I've got at least one, George.
Oh, perfect. Well, there you go. Thank you so much, everyone. That's all I'll say again.
Thank you, George, very much. I'm very, very happy to take questions typed or open up the mics, ladies and gentlemen, and speak away. We're all sharing a similar, myself included, being a year 13 parent. I've got my takeaways from this. Are there any questions? Shall I kick us off and just warm us up a little bit? George, what practical tip would you offer parents here if either before Christmas or possibly before Easter of their undergraduate first year, if through conversation or absence of contact of any kind, they really spot that their son or daughter is not the person that they remember and miss dearly? What practical tips? Who should they go to?
Well, first off, I mean, well, one of the kids said it today, didn't they? They said, rather than saying, "Are you okay?" they say, "I've noticed this about you. Are you okay?" equivalent. So for me, I've been working with families around this. I know it's quite hard hitting, or it's quite a big thing. Do you know what our kids need? They need face to face. My gentle advice, if it's possible, let's say if my father, my old man, my mum thought I was struggling, what would they do? They'd get in the car, they'd come to wherever I was staying, because sort of thing, and call up and be like, "Look, let's meet up, let's have some dinner, let's get you out of what's going on, and let's have a real frank and open discussion." That's the big thing for me, Mr. Cliff. And I will gently balance it with this. If any of us feel not uncomfortable, but perhaps thinking, "I'm not sure I could have that conversation, that real face-to-face, upfront conversation with my young man or woman who I've raised for 20 years, and I feel uncomfortable with that," let's do something about that for ourselves personally as well. Because for a lot of people, for a lot of us here, we might find it hard to have these conversations with our children because we still see them as the 6-year-old that we had on our shoulders or in our lap growing up. So for me, Mr. Cliff, I'm one of them, and I plead my privilege here, because obviously I do this all the time. We need to stop tiptoeing and let's just go for it. We take it, as I said to the kids today, if there was a physical injury, if someone had a broken bone in their arm, we wouldn't tiptoe, would we? We'd get it sorted. So why would we be any different in this?
Absolutely. Thank you, George.
I did see someone raise their hand and like kind of do the emoji hand. I don't want to put them on the spot, however, and have an awkward silence.
Was it a thumbs up, perhaps?
No, I think it was a hand.
Jolly well done.
It could have been,
Well, I'm just going to step in and reassure the gathered parents that having George do this training for students and for yourselves tonight is one very big part, but of a bigger project that we're working on at the moment. So I took my Ollie in year 13 to an offer holiday, and we've been to open days. Year 13 parents gathered, I imagine, might have done the same, and year 12 parents, that's just about around the corner with those open day seasons either side of the Christmas holiday. I'd strongly recommend speaking to that stand gathered in the foyer of the student union or wherever it might be in the event, to go to the student welfare services or the student services. Each university's may call it differently. I was hugely reassured about the progress being made by universities over the last 10 and 20 years. They really are far more tuned in to the emotional needs and their responsibility to care for those tens of thousands of undergraduates and mature students who are still under their care, but in a different adult way. They're not legally responsible in loco parentis as we are as a school, but it's really heartening. And I was very heartened 2 weeks ago at one university in the West Country to have a really long conversation with the head of student services while my son was in a fake lecture. And I got all the right answers. And I really did use my experience to scratch beneath the surface and probe what they do in different circumstances. In the Edge, they have a mental health first aid course delivered by a trained mental health first aider, really, really powerful. In the life module of the Edge, where we talk about Freshers Week, they get given something that we have adopted this year. This is a hard copy of it. This is an electronic copy if it's there ready to show you. Nick Weaver, as chair of the education committee at HMC, has worked really, really closely with UCAS and universities on a transition toolkit. In actual fact, it's 4 pages that look like that and then this. It couldn't be simpler. And that's sort of the whole point, that when they may be in a very, very low mood and they're thinking less logically, you need a simple reference point. And it's this final page that we're most keen on as they leave Ipswich School into university life. So the idea is that there in one hit is every possible contact number, web link that they might need. And they're publicly available charities or helplines. There's even the opportunity to put in an old school contact. It could be Miss Woodmansey, their tutor. But even better than that, and I want to genuinely demonstrate the moment, if you like, and how few clicks it should be. Part of the Edge lesson where we introduce the toolkit is to download an electronic copy to their phones. They all have notes on their home screen. Click on notes, and then straight away, I'll just exit that one. I've got other notes as well. I've got my reminders, but there it is, notes, and all those things that I can click on. So I think it was literally 3 clicks to get to all of those contacts that may be so reassuring at difficult times. So that was a bit of an answer to my own question. Are there any other questions?
Ms. Cliff, I think someone has written.
I have a question, please. So even before going to the university, the whole process of choosing subject and getting admitted in the university, the whole process is quite stressful for the kid. So how to deal with that? Do you have any suggestion on that?
So by the way, I've always been mindful when I work with parents, and by the way, I would highly recommend you all Google and YouTube. It's called the Winnicott theory. And I can't remember, but it begins with a W. You might need to help me out, Miss, give you a quick Google of it. Basically, I'm going to ad-lib the title. It's called The Good Enough Parent. Guys, we're going to get it wrong sometimes. We're going to get it right sometimes, okay? There's no rule book to be a parent. But I'm always wary when parents overshare with their child about how they're doing and how they're feeling. But in those situations, as they're young men and women, we're not oversharing. But if we're stressed by the situation ourselves, let's acknowledge that. Because what does it show to them? It's perfectly normal and it's understandable to be stressed at the moment in this situation. But then I would naturally be saying this as a therapist, if you don't mind. We cannot control the stress of the subject selection and whatnot. We cannot control the stress of that. But what do? We look at the things that are within our control. That's how we do it. Because if we reduce the stress of other things going on in our lives, these other things get reduced naturally. I will just say, without being too scary, the resting anxiety / stress levels of young people, this younger generation, the resting levels are 3 times as high as ours were at their age. And we need to acknowledge why. Nutrition, sleep patterns, social media and technology. Funny enough, with all of this connection we have in life, we're never more isolated than we are now as a society. What did we have to do growing up to amuse ourselves? Go out and play. And what did our parents say? Dinner's at 7. Off your pop. See you at 7. We had less risk factors and we had more chance to kind of de-stress. So for me, during this process of selecting subjects and whatnot, we have to collaborate with them on this. And if you don't mind, if I can link your question, Miss, to Rona's question about this mocks to A level to uni. I'm happy to share this. I don't brag about this. I had a gap year and it was the best thing for me. By the way, I'm an August baby. I don't think that matters too much nowadays, but in terms of giving you that year out to kind of mature and develop. But this was the best thing my father ever said to me at uni when I went to uni. So I did a classics degree. I think it caught Mr. Cliff out earlier, by the way. I think it's the accent catches people out. My father said to me this. He said, first off, my old man set the biggest importance for me. He said, hard work trumped everything. Hard work trumped everything in life, which I always agree with. But he said, son, if you don't like the course, you need to tell us and we will find other pathways for. And I remember he said it, we will find other pathways together for you. And I think this is a really big thing for kids, is that they're told, and by the way, Mr. Cliff and any teachers, I'm a teacher myself, exams are important, but I think for kids, because it's all they know, they think it's the most important thing in life. And that if you are going to do maths at uni, and then you go to uni and you think, oh, I don't like maths, I'd quite like to do a bit more language stuff. We want these children and young people to feel that they have the right to choose and they have these options. My gentle encouragement for all of you is this. Young people really struggle with just the basic choices in today's life because they have too many options. They have too many TV channels. They get everything at the click of a button. They can't even make the basic decisions. collaborate with them to make these decisions. And my gentle thing about stress when it comes to subjects and whatnots at uni, they get to choose lots of different modules for a reason. Let's collaborate with them and be enjoyable with even just the prospect of branching out and just being exposed to random stuff. I chose Italian Renaissance history for a module in my first year. It had no relevance to my degree. I chose it because I thought that sounds quite interesting. Why? Because my parents are very much like, hey, George, you're at uni. Go and make mistakes. Go and learn. So I've very much waffled there, but I hope my waffling's passionate in terms of, hey, stress is stress. Let's focus on the other things that can be within our control. The Maslow's hierarchy of needs, nutrition, sleep, relationships, digestive system, air, exercise, activity. If we focus on those things, which are very basic and don't need much effort, the stress of these other things is much more manageable.
Thank you, George. I did Google Winnicott. I'm not sure the car parts provider in California is what you had in mind, but with what I had, that's what I got. Sorry. Ronan, does that answer your question about absolutely?
Yes. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Now, I'm going to suggest something slightly different. I'm very happy that there might be radio silence to this, but amongst parents gathered here, there may be some experiences to offer rather than questions. You might have older children, siblings of current students, and you have memories of things gone particularly well, that worked well, that you want to share, or traps that they fell into and you wish you'd had this sort of training. So if there's that sort of comment or reflection to add, we'd be very, very welcome to learn from that. I did say there may be radio silence to that one, George.
Oh, gone. Did someone unmute at the same time?
I did, yes. We've had 2 older children go through uni. I think one of the things was actually you need to be friends with them on Facebook, because if they're putting stuff up that their parents don't want to see, no one should be seeing it.
May I just add one thing, Julie? I completely agree. However, this is going to insult all of us here. Facebook is for old people. That's what my child. But this is what I'd say: is it should be on social media. Like, you should be connected, but we should also be really, again, collaborative and upfront and saying, look, I get it that you don't want your mum, you don't want your dad commenting. Like, my nieces have got Instagram. I will just gently say TikTok is just a cesspit for low mental health. I'm just going to put that out there. But, I've said to my nieces, listen, I want to like your posts because I want to show that I've seen it. And I say, I said, look, as your uncle, I'm not going to be saying cheesy jokes or undermine you. I said, but I might say, oh, well done, kids, something like that. And my niece is like, that's fine, like typical, but I'm with you on that, Julie. Like I said, social media. Can I just say this, guys? And hopefully you'll punch in the air with this. Do you know what the biggest relief for young people is when they come for therapy? They come in 1 week and they look so much better. And they say, oh, yeah, it's because I've stopped using Twitter or X, or I've stopped using Instagram, or I no longer have notifications on it. And it takes them a while to get used to, but it's the biggest relief for them. So it's very telling. But Julia, that's a great point. My father made a suggestion for me. I was at Reading Uni, great uni for those looking at unis, by the way. It's a lovely uni. But my father said, why don't you stay over at Reading for the weekend and see if you even like the area? He said, let's do a dummy run, see if there's good restaurants, there's shops. And he said, we'll do it together. We'll go out and all of this sort of stuff. It was perfect. It's those little things. Again, it's a form of respect. It's collaboration. It also shows to the child, listen, son, I'm with you for as long as you need me to be. There you go, Mr. and Mrs. Cliff met at Reading Uni. There you go.
Not a question. It's just a fond memory.
Yeah, that's it.
Right. So we're approaching 10 to 8. So back to the idea of Friday night and looking forward to the weekend. Oh, there she goes. Dear me. George, closing comments, 2 from me, and that is really important. I want to end on a positive, upbeat message. But the first one is, of many takeaways that I've had from the student session and this evening, is that reassurance that discussing suicide, there's no causation. There is zero evidence that it increases the risk. It brings it out into the open, difficult as the word may sound. And that's been a really reassuring message for the students, and I hope for the audience tonight. And my final comment, I don't think anyone will disagree. I'm going to go right back to the beginning and 7 o'clock, when in fact, I think that it will be amazing. They will love it, and they will look back and say that those 3 or 4 years will be up there with the very best years of their young adult lives. And I think that training them in this way is only going to help them prepare for that with a bit more perspective and balance. And forewarned is forearmed, and that's a phrase we use with them today. They really seemed to get it, and I think we've closed the triangle now by sharing with parents as well. We've got students, school and parents doing what we can whilst we've got some direct control, so that when we have indirect control and they're living away from home for the first time, that we're reassured and confident that they've got this toolkit of ideas ready for some low moments. So George, thank you ever so much. Please enjoy your hotel breakfast tomorrow morning. I'm very jealous. And everybody, thank you for joining us, and have a lovely weekend. See you very soon.
Thanks everyone, take care.
Bye-bye.